I'm Danielle Susie. I'm the Programming and Media Coordinator for the Poetry Center of Chicago. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're really happy to have you here. The Poetry Center was established in 1973, and we work hard, very hard, to promote poetry in Chicago through readings, workshops, and arts education. We do that primarily through two different programs. The first is our Hands-On Stanzas program, which puts working poets in Chicago public schools to teach poetry to underserved Chicago public school students. It's an amazing program. You can go to our website and read incredible poems by these young students. The second program is our reading series, which brings us to tonight. The 6 Points Reading Series is a monthly series we've developed to showcase some of the most innovative and talented contemporary writers. And tonight we're excited to hear from Sara Henning and Rachel Mennies, both from out of Chicago, which is really exciting. Our first reader, Sara Henning, is the author of A Sweeter Water, as well as 2 chapbooks, Garden Effigies and To Speak of Dahlias. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in journals such as Crazy Horse, Quarterly West, Green Mountains Review, Crab Orchard Review, and Rhino. Winner of the 2015 Lydia Hull Memorial Poetry Prize, she is currently a doctoral student in English and creative writing at the University of South Dakota, where she serves as an associate editor of Sundress Publications. Please join me in welcoming Sara Henning.
I'm going to apologize in advance. I've been commuting from the plains for the past probably 12 hours, so that's why I was kind of coming in a little bit late, and if I'm still a little bit out of breath, it was wondering if I would actually get here on time, and I'm glad that I did. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, for coming to hear Rachel and I'd read together. Thank you, Danielle, for putting this wonderful thing together. It's such a joy to be able to come and to share work. So I'm going to be reading from predominantly my full-length collection, A Sweeter Water. I'm going to transition into reading from Garden Effigies, which just came out from Dancing Girl Press. So a nice Chicago feminist chapbook press. And then I'm going to go ahead and follow up with just a couple pieces of new work, just because that has to happen. So. All right. In many ways, I'm running a Rhino forum on Sunday about writing the drama of the self and neo-confessionalism. So you may see some of those threads sort of, coming throughout, infusing themselves sort of throughout my poems. In some ways, I would say my first book was a book written predominantly for my father. I would say my chapbook addresses sort of conflicted relationships with women, specifically matrilinear relationships. So I figure I ought to start with some of the patrilinear context. So God knows the difference between the living and the dead, and the he in the poem is in fact my father. The afternoon he took his life. His soul stripped its clothes off in the street. The street stripped its soul from the afternoon he took himself from. He spoke to the nakedness of the afternoon, bent his knees to its sudden darkening of breath. He darkened his knees with the nakedness his breath bent to, spoke. Everyone saw this as a sign of his soul flying toward the cracked bowl of the sky. Everyone saw the sky as a bowl cracked by his soul. And they prayed as though praying would cut his body through, and they prayed his body would cut through, praying would grow skin, feathers, blossoms of consciousness, or his coming sin. A consciousness of feathers, they would say, his soul coming to new skin. This next piece is about, I'm sort of a nature documentary buff. And so the cameraman, John Vardy, was watching leopards. I also like big cats. And so this wild African leopard named Manana engaged in this ritual of mourning over one of her cubs. It was kind of unprecedented and fascinating, and so I had to write about it. And so that's what this poem became, How We Love. While the mother leopard foraged, a python lured her cub into its throat. When she found the den empty, python slow with new architecture, she tore until it surrendered the body black with digestive fluid. Wholed she left him, barely dead. Last summer in Illinois, a woman was found under a pile of trash, her animals eating what was left of her. Neighbors said when her husband died, she stopped letting go of what passed through her hands. Even the leopard carried the cub's body to a field close to her den, chewed it tenderly to pieces, swallowed each down. Even I still look for your effigy everywhere. Practice your body until it's raw susurration, burned not by my throat but my heart. Which of us stays at her guttural refrain for days, though our love was never so close to our hunger? What is love but a set of urges? Hold the nape of the neck, just so. Carry the pieces of the body, just so. How to pray like a girl. The summer I left home, my mother waited until night to pour gasoline on a nest of wasps, take her lighter to the canopy's underbelly. It could have been a paper lantern glutted with lightning bugs for the flood of bodies surging past the closure of pulp like a mouthful of psalms, bodies that by morning lay smoke fragile, waiting, as though I too might forsake them, as though all I could do was trust the literalness of their bodies, the parts not yet stunned by light. That summer I drove away like she never taught me to pray, with pistons loose and mouthing oil, tires bruxing cardinal bones. I could taste the learned cruelty of heaven, fledgling thick on my tongue. And this last piece I'm going to read from my full length mentions a dead reckoning, which is a nautical phrase. It's in sort of navigation. It's sort of the process of calculating kind of where one is from where one was. Dead reckoning. The heart, like a ship, needs a hard hand on the spar, sharp spurn of wheel, just to stay cardinal, just to keep from letting go. The moment the friend gives up on her lover because she wants more than his tight jeans and lost jobs, too many afternoons worth of burned verbs, words chased to raw nests of hunger, daughter clinging like a vine of honeysuckle to her thigh when he comes into the room, because he's not her father. And what's the difference? We all enter the world as no one's angel, drunk on pain, expecting to be loved. Or maybe we look for other parts of our body to speak our words. Who could blame him for shooting whiskey straight like a spindrift's discord? It's one thing to want and another to be wanting. And when she's had enough to heave trash bags onto her porch, so full of his things and her sorrow, they could have held dead bodies. He has the only picture the girl ever drew of him, tattooed on his calf, a self-portrait, eyes like a caged mare's, shoulders rising from her back like ships more beautiful for their wreckage, to keep her. Perhaps leaving a body's fate to another's hands makes that body redeemable. I look at my own arm's topography of scars, memories usable mapped to the meridian, same trough and ridge as the inky curvature of the girl's face. Tell me, is suffering at the expense of another its own wrapped truth? There was always a discord of grace between them, the lovers I mean, not the ship broaching in indifferent water, not my body foregrounded from its tapestry of mistakes. Truth is its own affection. The world between us is tender as the world that won't embody us. So, as I said, the chapbook has some matrilineal strains. It's not entirely matrilineal, but there's a lot of that there. And this next piece talks a bit about Marilyn Monroe and my mother, specifically how she handled my father's suicide. It's called Marilyn. She's a bivouac stitched in a marquisette, not a schooner glittering over a siege of water. She looking hard at her hips jettisoned in fabric, her eyes glassy as a cat's, looking hard for the serenade, happy birthday, Mr. President, still surging its foregone gift between her tongue and glottal. Instead, she finds a tarantella of subway air quivering at her thighs. It's not sultry, this trompe-l'oeil of bone sweltering under bone. Once my mother locked me with her in a bathroom, swallowed a whole bottle of Quaaludes. When my grandmother usurped the lock with a paper clip, she found me on the plush carpet next to her, pretending to dream. I could have been staring into my mother's face, murmuring siege, then sunder. I could have been pretending my father had not killed himself the week before. Instead, I'm fantasizing about a black hole nesting, invisible and insatiable, at the center of the Milky Way. In Kansas, years later, scientists would claim they could create a black hole that would propel a spaceship. First, square kilometers of solar panels plated into the cosmos like a field of glass heather, gamma ray laser pointed and waiting for the spherical shell of photons to bloom. And then a hole. Not the renegade daughter who, after years of extradition, still supernovas for no one. And then a girl, not the hole now vibrating on its spin axis, foraging for pulsars, purging radiation into space's dusky tapestry. Instead of the next phase of human destiny, I'm thinking of her face, frantic and sated, in the white telephone's gloss, the light thawing around her body so pearlescent the morning they found her. Marilyn, face down on her silky duvet. Marilyn, every effigy of bone or joint tangled, not shattered in its own discretion of vertigo. Nothing in her moon-kissed shoulders, the supple compliancy of sheen and freckle, which would save her. I'm thinking of the bathroom's wall sconces bathing my mother's nearly breathless body with light. I believe she will wake up thinking anything can be clutched into darkness. I believe I'll open my eyes and see the ship upbraiding the sky. The art of drowning, the art of war. When her girlfriend pretended to be ransomed by water, my 10-year-old mother dove after the luster of bathing suit, breaching a reckless tide. Blonde hair sheening like a jellyfish pulses in flotsam and milky lacquer. The girls laugh like a cleaving oyster. My mother still under her, spitting up shame and spume. Every unburied delta that moves through her body became a torrent disgracing her starboard. Every lover exploiting her water's plush vertigo, a lesson in spindrifts, sternways, shells that sliver her toes. Like her, I'll learn to hold my breath until I'm grit and glitter, coal and foam, until I confuse love for mooring, the horizon's tideward fallowness, not one more ruthless pull. I grew up in a sea town, and then I moved to the Sodakian tundra. This next piece has a bit of both of those in it. At the mercy of the surge. 2 lobsters are shunted into a cooler without water, and I'm driving without stopping. I'm not thinking of the lightning sail, claws tethered with rubber. I'm not thinking of their bodies thrown away live at the end of the night. How it must be in your final moments, a flashback of heart and ganglion, the realization that your life will begin and not end with water. I was the kind of girl who caught beached fiddler crabs while my brother used driftwood to splint gulls' wings. The kind of girl who turned bathtubs into seafloor burrows, spending whole nights standing vigil over a wounded molter, while larvae hatched and fell from the belly. The kind who watched the orphans languor, heavy with yolk, then mimicked the tide with my fingers. The kind of girl who, like a dune, still lives at the mercy of the surge. One afternoon, I'm throwing beach jellyfish, my hands thronged in my mother's old pantyhose, watching their bodies bob and disappear in the spume. The bodies resemble gelatin molds, the manubrium like walnuts clustered at the bottom of a ramekin. The sand hot and loose under my feet, then tentacles and nematocysts purging venom. I'd like to tell you I ran home to a mother who consoled me with cotton gauze soaked in vinegar, a salve I can still smell. I'd like to tell you I left the animal for the cormorants that eat young shrimp clinging to its bell. When it stung me, I used a washed-up Coke can to rub sand into its body. I used a stick to sever it ruthlessly into many bodies. In my pain, I stopped being a girl. I could tell you it was like Orpheus, the bell singing desperately for its aboral axis, the ruined crystals of the eye stalks clinging together like harp strings, ocelli glittering audibly like a concordance of mica. Not that I left crab's pearl, apron of gill and ransom, to be culled by fierce birds. Not that I left claws forever reaching toward the sun. Now just my snow-thick boots are lobbing over tile, the cooler a stark and empty reckoning point, the meat manager dismissive when I pointed the sign. Say there were never any lobsters, I want to tell him. I'm a woman who seasons her pot with spindrift, not just any brackish storm. This next piece stars a kitsune, which in Japanese folk literature is a celestial fox. It takes on human form, sometimes women or girls or elderly men, depending on the the myth we're dealing with. So this one's called Woman Border Crosser, and it stars a kitsune. The vixen, trespassing, my mother's gazebo, the one whose tail helixes in the turn spindles as she crouches by the parquet deck. Will she fit reeds and skulls like avatars over her head at dusk? Will she stand erect then, a tincture of hips and clavicles, though the brush stays fused to her pelvic girdle? She's a body zigzagging between darknesses, only flirting with space and time as she's one place, then another. I'm watching her sashay, not prowl, toward the storm-fractured pine trees bordering the yard, then turn back as though her secret's already slipped into pantyhose, flattened and cinched into a pretense of spine. Fox by day, woman by night. I want to watch her lure any man not inoculated against her beauty into fever. Watch him grow lacerations of desire like seeds of Spanish moss, winded or carried by birds. Watch him thrash under the fate of her body still swathed in almond-colored organza. I want to watch her decide between eating his liver, unfolding the russet lobes like leaves of artichoke, tonguing long strips of his heart trimmed and seared in shallot oil, or letting him lift her hips in his car seat sun-bleached suede. She's what I mean by woman, not transformation. He's what I mean by man misled by pleasure, thighs glistening like bitten starfruit. So what if he closes his eyes, grasps her flushed belly? So what if her tail is unraveling in a bolt of lightning? She's only waiting for him to come so hard she disappears. And then, by his front axle, he'll see the red plumage loitering as she's loitering now by the gazebo, my eyes still caressing her, dandelion florets catching in her fur. What do I call this border crosser, this parable once awkwardly concealed in stilettos, now running at full throttle? Her hocks and hind feet, translucent in her wake, are kicking up names and dust. Angry. Because ice sheens from the floor now. I'm not calling this a he just finished sieging the kitchen kind of angry. I'm not even calling this a I'm on my knees palming the wreckage of snow kind of angry, though I'm on my knees. I'm telling you, it's not the door slamming afterward that's holding me here like I'm stunned by linoleum. It's his boots, too scarred to become arbiters, matching the breach of dirt and soul. Tell me you don't understand this wipe up the floor with his shirt kind of angry, this bury it in the yard afterwards kind of angry. I can't help thinking about my grandmother riding her Schwinn 4 miles to the liquor store to buy my grandfather's booze, the way she believed him when he told her she was too stupid to drive. I can't stop thinking about the line the tires must have made in winter, snow grafted to rubber, bits of asphalt smiting the bevel, even the dark stripe always left in the wake. She never talked about the trash bag poncho thrown over her coat, throb of leather seat between her legs, or a whole afternoon of pedaling through slurries of salt. I learned to imagine her leaning harshly on the turn radius, perfecting the gyroscopic procession to correct for the bottles obscuring the wind. Imagine yourself removing your shoes in the garage so he'll never see how salt can stain, Go ahead. Toss the poncho on a hook. Cosset the shoes with cloth and vinegar. Know the salt's there for good. Anything can happen when you fall too far into the arms of a hard winter. Anything. So this lattice work kind of angry, this needle moving between your heart and your bones kind of angry. Tell me you felt this too. My hands are grasping the shirt's worn cotton. I'm touching the door. There's dirt stung into the linoleum's fleur-de-lis. Dark's now fouling the heraldry of jade and barley. Can't you see he's turned me into a river? Can't you see I've become a part of his flood? There are transgressions that didn't leave with his body. Tell me it's like salt worn into linen, the man in him, like an ice flow, a fast-moving impasse over water. You guys got the polar vortex a couple years back. We got it too. We got it really badly. I think I was stranded for maybe 4 days, possibly. I was pacing a lot. So I figured I'd write about it or I'd wear a hole in the ground pacing some more. So this one's called All Bad with Polar Vortex and what it means to survive you. Begin with the shape your car left in snow, the first night the storm wouldn't leave us. It's like I took chalk to the driveway's gravel, drew outlines or angels with the same uncertain tenderness I'd use to touch the place your hair and neck hew their limits, scatter into vertebrae, atlas and axis, the entirety of your spine's scaffolding like stairs we once collapsed onto, so full of wanting that our bodies' borders rebuked each other, grew blurry. Just as there is no place now where concrete and ice aren't coupling ruthlessly. Later, I learned that salt is the answer to everything. Its grit the only resolution for an ice that brutally clings. You told me that ice is just water missing its body while wishing it gone. You said this to soothe me. This afternoon, I watched snow and wind upbraid each other, two bodies fighting while making love, and the lines between heave and sunder are restless, elusive, and I can't forgive either one. 2 more, they're quick. Another all bad. All bad in which want is an untamed hive. Let's begin with your body. Not hexagonal cells of wax. Then my body, not oak forsaken by heart rot, your exposed aerial combs luxuriating in my sapwood. Let's wait for night to lull the swarm with scorched lavender, to witness the drones gorging on uncapped honey before we harvest the comb you'll mash, then sieve through mosquito netting, until the nectar, incited by enzymes and breakneck winging, pours heavy and raw like a pleasure never meant for us. It's as if we are the winged martyr who, unwilling to be pacified, turns on his aggressor with stylus and barbed lancet, who glides, then retracts, won't stop urging until he's sternum to skin. And it's not venom, but his gaze that stings, the intimacy, then the breach. Lancet hard in the flesh while his body undulates on the ground, and what is sacred is lost. I'm putting my lips to the wound we won't call his undoing. I'm holding this final defense of sweetness in my mouth like it's a red flowering currant, like I'm some kind of queen, and this alone will save us. So the last one I thought I'd share with you is the one that won the Linda Hole this year. So it's about, as you probably perceived from some of the chapbook poems, my grandfather's fairly aberrant alcoholic binges, which in some ways my dissertation project is basically concerns that the truth that only starlings will speak. So this one's called How I Learned I Have the Shine. Thank you so much for listening. For days, when asphalt sees through the still wet scrapes. I'm shacked up in the deep freeze box my grandfather resurrects from the dump. I bastion and sulk there, shunning my grandmother's hand-me-down pumps and floral jacquard, throw pillows sheathing cardboard ragged as my ponytail. So let's begin with my huffy scooter, jelly sandals glittering between escape velocities. The gutter water I fishtail through while grinding curbs, skirt splitting at the kick pleat, blood perfuming the air. Now, instead of watching my grandfather razor windows he'll dress with valences, lathe saloon doors from closing flaps, I'm lifting the gauze, feeling for rocks, shape-shifting under the crystalline scabs. I'm making bets with myself on who will purge the surface, petite rosettes, and who will loiter, tacit and pure, in my skin. The lapsed grit I'll learn to smooth my hands over, silky as my grandfather's rage when his martini lunch cuts through modesty, and my mother urges us toward the amnesty of our rust-stung Chevrolet. Vermouth's nude currency flits through his glass now, but I've given myself to clairvoyance, the highballs and tinctures of Dubonnet that will suture the afternoon. His eyes like sow thistle as my mother guns the engine. I'm watching the slice of lime, strung holding the rim, lose its clutch, too thick and planchet-shaped, not to yearn for baptism. Dirty girl, broken hyoid, slinking, not vortexing, down. Thank you.
Thanks, Sara. That was beautiful. Thank you. I hope that was worth the 12-hour drive for you. I'm so sorry. I should mention right now, all of their books are for sale in the back. So her chapbooks and her full length, and then Rachel's full length is also for sale in the back. So buy them, obviously. Buy their books. Rachel Mennies, our second and final reader, is the author of The Glad Hand of God Points Backward, which is the winner of the 2013 Walt McDonald First Book Prize in Poetry, and the chapbook No Silence in the Fields. Her poetry has appeared recently in Black Warrior Review, Hayden's Ferry Review, Drunken Boat, Colorado Review, Crazy Horse, and elsewhere, and has been reprinted at Poetry Daily. Mennies currently serves, and this is a new appointment, I believe, currently serves as a series editor for the Walt McDonald First Book Prize in Poetry at Texas Tech University Press. She teaches writing at Carnegie Mellon University and serves as member of Agni's editorial staff. Please join me in welcoming Rachel Mennies.
Hi, everyone. Thank you first to Chicago for having me. You are a wonderful city, and I love being inside of you. Thank you to Danielle and to the Poetry Center of Chicago in particular for bringing me out, and to Sara for an absolutely beautiful reading. I am stunned in the best way to hear how our work communicates, and that was, though I have read your work before, definitely hearing it now is a surprise and joy. So I think as I read, we'll kind of get to see the method behind Danielle's madness in putting us together today. I'm going to start by reading a few from The Glad Hand of God Points Backwards, jump to some new work. I am working on a new collection called Salt. I learned after writing a book with a very long title that the next book should have a very short title, and I'm putting that into practice now. And then I'll jump back to the Glad Hand and finish. So this is How to Make Yourself Remembered. Bury the trinkets first, candlesticks or a favorite paring knife, the silver, but not the gold. If your story has a dog, bury her bone. In her next life, she'll return as a woman, find herself traveling through Germany, riveted to a patch of ground in the former West Berlin. Bury the fragile in a shallow grave, the cotton skirts, the soft paper, the white linens for the Sabbath. Your excavator should pull your relics whole from an earth still kind to its company. Bury household objects purposefully to perplex an excavator, a diaphragm, or an unmarked teaspoon. That way, when they reconstruct your story, the little rubber disc will live forever, an alien saucer, with pins to anchor it in an American history museum. The spoon will cradle a weight unasked of it before. I don't know the story, but I can tell the story. This is a true story. It goes, grandmother grabbed me from my mother's grasp like there had been some sort of error, like the 36 hours of labor and contractions had come from her own long empty belly. I was immediately hers. Of course, I remember nothing from this night. Newest to earth, I'm held in the mouth of my family narrative. She moved quick. She made demands. The three of us in the sterile room, the first grandchild, a swaddle of perfect wet rage. The three of us already lost to each other. What's given must have its take. To fill arms, arms must empty. And so my grandmother left my mother for the longest moment without her first child, who opened her reach to me, who should have fought and only cried, who can summon not a moment of this fissure, who grew up to write down the truth and the lies together, who remembers the future, who reads the past first, who holds up her hands to be held and waiting feels the night, who builds the museum before the victor comes to claim her dead. One of the strange things that happens when you write a book, I assume this is true in other genres, but certainly a book of poetry, is you realize your preoccupations as you're writing, certainly not before. There's a lot of poems I'm going to read today about museums. I'm going to read some poems about peaches. I'm going to read some poems about sex. And you sort of realize as you're writing that these are the things, the images that grab you long after the poems are on the page. So I have two in a row about museums. This next one is called First Gentile. I promise him bitterness, salt, the taste of all my dead, gold and wax, the roots of trees. Against me, he is scaffolding, linen, bicep and thigh, all newness. Private liturgy of high school hunger, snow collecting on his parents' car. I've just observed Hanukkah, the consecrated fuel that burned on faith, young enough to believe in the miracle that's mine alone, a forsaken fuse and the hands that light it, the labor of soldiers and battle and cold, then the flame. He finds me in handfuls, first hair, then skin, then cries, then silence, his torso reclothed, tying his sneakers. You'd be better at this, he says, at touching so quickly, efficient and practiced, if you stopped thinking so much. But I have the worries of my great-aunts, their consonant names. After he leaves, the snow melts to puddles. The engine of my mouth runs on the fumes of God. Another strange thing that happened, one of the many strange things that happens when you publish a book and you bring it home to your family is they want to know which pieces of it are true. And in poetry, we live in this world kind of middle space where we can sort of dodge that question nicely by saying the speaker is not the poet. But in my case, I wonder if this is, I know, and Sara spoke a little bit about this in her reading. Sometimes the speaker is the poet. And when I brought this book home to my family, this is one of the poems that they immediately sat down and said, am I in this poem? Am I in this poem? And there are a couple others I'll read today that fit that criteria. But writing a book is not always easy for a dinner table conversation. But it's worth it. It's worth it. You should do it. This is my sister, the diviner. Bulimia has made my sister visionary. Tomorrow, she says to me, will be a better day. And there she sits, an oracle. This is how Romulus founded Rome. Their bowls of organs, their scrambling soothsayers counting to 6 or 12. Their hands in the guts, rummaging for answers. Their surety in the process, their results. 2 fingers hard at work, pressing down, down. Beside her bent back, I sit, waiting, my temples pressed against her kidneys. Tomorrow at the breakfast table, we'll open the times, read of nations waxing and waning, all plot. Love keeps us together at the table, feasting on eggs and bread and butter. Love, that closed mouth, fit always, despite ourselves, to bursting. This poem also has a small family story in it. I think it was 3 years ago around this time that the rapture was coming. And I'm kind of glad it didn't for a whole bunch of reasons. But one of the interesting things about growing up in a Jewish household in a community that was mixed but was mostly Christian was feeling that otherness kind of bring you closer together as a family. And when I was home just before the rapture was supposed to come, I remember talking to my father, who said, very much in the character of my father, the good news about this is if it actually happens, we're all fucked. Like, all of us together are fucked. So we don't have to worry about saying goodbye to each other. We're all just gone. So I started thinking about that and the sort of consequences of that in light of a lot of what this book talks about. The first half of the book, which I'm not reading from today, talks a lot about my family's relationship to the Holocaust and sort of broader ideas of the consequences of being other in the wrong country at the wrong time. And this poem doesn't quite cover that, but certainly thinks about this idea in particular. And this is Rapture. Wet pink shock of a sliced open peach, pit hard between our teeth, reached in a liquid, honest hurry. Peach in the fingers of a certain lover's hand. Peach juice sliding down the wrist of a man with assertive hungers. Peach bringer of rapture, the climax, but not the fall. Peach sky rising up and up, free of consequence, impossible but for our chase of it. Peach in the crisper drawer, softening. We hear stories of the pastor and his book, so certain of fire, his biblical calculus. Peach hot, sugared in an oven. The mouth of red around the brain-shaped, dumbstruck stone. Peach, the very taste of sin. Peach that sends the crows circling, rapture here and gone. Peach God wrapped for carrion, turning above us in the heavens, waiting for us, ripening to satisfy ourselves. Come to him pitted, come to him finished, made rotten by your sweet time in his son. All right, I'm going to read some new stuff from Salt. And in some ways, I'm still feeling this out a little bit. These poems in this collection pick up where the Glad Hand left off a little bit in thinking about sex and womanhood, and especially in these poems, being a young woman and coming of age and the sort of stakes and consequences of that time. I think all you need to know about this next poem is that I just liberally quote from The English Patient at the end, and I hope that's okay with everybody. It's a great book, so if the language starts to shift a little bit, I'm probably just stealing it. And this is revision, removing him from the sex scenes in all of your books. You don't touch him. You never touch him. Your hands reopen the book and crease the pages. You worship each new man the protagonist fucks and leaves. You are ready for all the freshman boys in Hollis Hall. You march down Brattle Street from the library fed. He sells used Hondas a few left turns from your childhood home. You close the book again. He becomes a doctor, performs the world's first ever head-to-head transplant. He has children, then never has children. You turn to a new chapter. He joins the Air Force. He opens a bakery. His hands knead the growing soft white. Is he hot from the work, reaching to open the window? Is it loud on the dawn Boston street? You don't write about him. You return one stack of books and withdraw another. You whisper, your gardens were the gardens I spoke of when I spoke to you of gardens, to strangers on the tee. Would he cover your eyes too with his fingers? Would he take you in the museum hallway, in the back seat of Cairo taxicabs? You don't touch him. You never touch him. You count the doors again on the all-boys floor. You imagine opening one, pushing a blank young face to yours. Remember how he never loved you. Remember to write that down. It's another poem about peaches. Revision first. And the whole mystery lifts like a skirt. How you mistook your suffering for learning. How you took the rock between your legs as if you could make it a diamond with enough grinding, enough prayer. How you thought the summer and its swollen peaches existed as metaphor for your desire, teenage girl for whom everything in heat serves as sanction for your appetite. How you ripped peach after peach at their crease and sucked them over the sink alone, imagined each boy watching. How did they taste? Why can't you remember? Still life with burned mouth. Who taught you pain would erase your longing? Why bite the ribs from the habanero's skin before running your knife through its ember flesh? Who taught you to pestle the seeds you saved to a pulp, to suck your fingers, weeping until numbness fattens your hungry tongue? Why grip your own shoulders and burn? Why slide your hands under your clothing, press palms to scorching flesh so useless it wants a man who will never touch you again? How will you unlearn this? Why does relief prove its madness by dragging your mule body across its desires to the next green man already waiting? Who forgot to teach you relief? So this next poem, I was thrilled to hear you, Sara, read two Al-Bads. I'm going to read one. And I taught the Al-Bad this summer in a 6-week survey creative writing class, which if you're doing the math means I had 2 weeks for poetry, which is not nearly enough weeks. It is certainly no weeks worth of time to actually teach form and to teach meter and rhyme. And so I thought, all right, we'll do, it was a class on writing about love, which is important to mention. So I thought, all right, we will do the epistolary, we will write love letters in the form of poems, and we will do the Al-Bad. And in explaining this form, which, for a little bit of background, right, really the only thing you need to know is it's supposed to have at some point in there, right, two lovers departing at dawn, something about that longing and that departure. And I'm describing this form to my students, most of whom are between the ages of 18 and 21, undergrads at Carnegie Mellon. And one of my students, who actually was a pre-college student, so even younger, a baby millennial, which is important, raised her hand and said, I just don't get this. Like, I don't get what the big deal is. I don't get what makes this a form. So I said, okay, let's talk about this a little bit. What is bothering you? Why can't we move forward from this moment as a class? And she sincerely said, I don't understand what the big deal is. Why can't they just text each other later? To which I thought, all right, so we've all read the pieces in the Atlantic about how the millennials have killed everything, right, one at a time. We have officially also killed this form. It is gone. There is no more longing in the world if you are 17 and you have a smartphone. So I had partially selfishly assigned this because I've been working on this poem, hacking away at it for a long time, couldn't get it right. And so I said, I'm going to teach this so I can get it as a writer, and defiantly went home from that class and said, I've got to finish this. I've got to get this draft right. I'm not sure if I did yet, but I still feel like I have to do this, like I have to read this sort of as an old millennial, I guess, significantly older than my 17-year-old student, but I think a millennial nonetheless. So in that spirit, this is Al-Bad with Plan B. I cannot forgive my body, all its hopeful work to keep you close. It forgets how lost desire looks after months left in sunlight, white left behind ring of itself, a shocked ghost against the earth. Tonight, my body peels its arms open like a swimmer in the waves. It puts its mouth to the brakes and drinks. In daylight, I shuffle my body to the pharmacist, your back warm in the bed. My body knows that water always lifts a loss to the surface. It forgets the others drying on the sand. It touches its tongue to salt and thirsts, confuses love with carry, with grow. It climbs its emptiness back into bed. My body reaches for your shoulder, opens for you again. This is Elegy with Attack Dog. And the loss takes your neck in its teeth, and it splits the skin. And the loss shakes and shakes you, leaves your spent body on the pavement. And the loss returns quietly, as if to forgive you, his fountain pens in the chipped clay mug, his bourbon softened with water. And the loss finds you months later, blissful, until you realize on vacation in San Francisco, the loss climbs the palm-lined hills with you as penance for your happiness. And the loss bares its teeth, and the loss gnaws the window latch, and the loss sees you sleep with an arm outstretched, longing for him, sees your body of bet-hedged love. And the loss takes your neck in its teeth, and it splits the skin, and the loss shakes and shakes you, leaves you where it drops you. And today the sky decides to cover you in snow instead of rain, the new year begun without your permission. Those pens still splayed in the chipped clay mug, the bourbon closing your eyes. And the loss pulls you close, for there's nothing else left for the loss to do. It nuzzles you, retracts its snarl. It sleeps like the dead at the foot of your bed. And you lie awake and stare at the loss, rubbing that soft spot at your throat, that misses the shape of its mouth. All right, I'm going to read one more. We're going to go back to the glad hand. I'm going to read the very last poem in the book, and that's called The Jewish Woman Remembers Deuteronomy 6:6-9. And we're at the end of a pretty big deal holy period in Judaism. We just kind of went through Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And this poem is based on a prayer that I remember saying with great feelings of duty very often during that period, but also more broadly during the Friday night services, which is that piece from Deuteronomy that this is based on. We cry for God in worship, later in bed, witness to the power of giving up our power. Outside, the wind crying for God. Outside, in the fit of rain, a God just forming. Our bodies naked before men are God, as sure as the force that pushes men toward us. What they search for is a noise in the earth, like God growing crops, still saving room enough for the cemeteries. The lungs expand with our God, God in the scream, also the moan, in the splitting of wood and the spilling of blood, the slaughtered bull and the dismounted horse. The broken limb, the slaughtered bull and the dismounted horse, God of the summoning, curling finger. The broken limb and its setting right. God in the remembering and the forgetting, the sheepskin paper and the pulp. The words we can recite, they're loosening as we walk to our end. God that keeps our eyes reading. God in the hands that close the book, remove the spectacles, and turn off the light. God in our night, which never can stay night. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Once again, their books are in the back. Once again, you should buy them. All right, housekeeping things that are coming up. I know you're excited. I'm going to tell you about them right now. Our next event is 2 weeks from now, October 8th, in here. So it's a Thursday, and it's at 5:30, not 6. What a change. And we're welcoming Mary Rose Carroll for reading and conversation. Mary Rose is a writer and visual artist. She's also the wife of the late poet Paul Carroll, who was a co-founder of the Poetry Center of Chicago. She wrote a book about the Beat generation in Chicago and Chicago Review and the censorship that surrounded that. And so a lot of it is stories that Paul told her over a series of years. And we're really excited to welcome her. She's going to be in conversation with our executive director. It's going to be a really great time. You should come. Our next 6 points reading, we're going to be switching to Wednesdays now. I know you've really gotten used to Thursdays, but bear with me. Switching to Wednesdays, and the next reading will be on October 21st, and we'll feature Jennifer Moore and Hadara Barnadav. They're two of my favorite poets. They're amazing. They're going to be great. And then our Poets Look at Painting submissions just closed on Monday, but that event is November 18th. And that's sort of an open call for submissions, and we're having poets who are doing like ekphrastic responses to visual art come and read those poems. And we're reviewing submissions right now, and we're really excited. We got over 200 submissions, which is a lot to read, but it's fun. As always, we're really grateful to have you here tonight. There's a sign-up list in the back if you're interested in joining our email list, and grab a bookmark on your way out. Thank you so much. Have a good night.